So let's begin with the hero. One of the most famous heroic events in Western culture deals with Abraham. This is a painting by Rembrandt of the sacrifice of Isaac. God told Abraham, if you obey me, I will reward you with descendants as numerous as stars in the sky and as numerous as the sands on the seashore. Abraham finally had a son. Then God comes around and says, you know, nice son you have there, but to show your love for me, I need you to sacrifice Isaac. And so father and son go up the mountain together. One can only imagine the young boy looking up at his dad and says, you know, Dad, where's the ram that we usually have for sacrifices? And then Abraham, a man of faith, a man of trust, looks down at his young boy. As a father of two, it had to be incredibly painful, and said, you know, God will provide. And here we have the moment at which Abraham is about to slice the throat of his son. He's already tied him up. You can imagine the screams that were happening from that young boy. And Abraham then has his hand stayed, right? Is coming down, and the angel of God at that moment does it, saying that, okay, we know God realizes the faith, the trust you have, and so you don't have to do this. And then provides a ram. So this is an example of a past event, a hero, Abraham, right? Special man. He brought the idea of monotheism to the world, according to Judaism. And it is a religious scene, right? It's an interaction between human beings and divine beings. If we fast forward a couple hundred years later, at the beginning of the 19th century, we look at the presentation of the death of Socrates by David. David's presentation has in the center a hero, in this case Socrates. Socrates was not a religious figure, but he was a heroic figure in the sense that he introduced rationalism to the world, that he tried to get people to consider questions of justice and truth in a rational rather than a divinely inspired way. In both instances, if you look at the pictures, you can see that the people in them are objectively presented, right? They're proportionally right. They have the right muscles in the right places, the eyes, the ears, the beards, the clothing, right? Everything looks normal. They're not really out of place. This could be that you're an eyewitness to this event and you can see it objectively, and everybody standing around would watch what's going on. The key difference is the subject of the painting shifted from a religious to a secular hero. Both in the past, both significant transformational figures, but the message of these two paintings could hardly be more different. One is about faith, the other is about reason. One hero trusts God even to the point of unreasonable conduct, trying to kill your son, and the other trusts reason to the point of accepting self-sacrifice for the good of the community. He believed in the power of argument so much that when he lost an argument, he was willing to drink hemlock to show that value to society. Heroes. If we move into the 19th century, we see another hero. This time, Goya's executions of the 3rd of May. Goya was a Spanish painter during the time of the Napoleonic invasion of the Iberian Peninsula. And this occurrence where French troops on the right killed Spanish peasants on the left further brings us along this timeline. It's still a past event. It is still a secular, a heroic event. But instead of religious heroism, this is secular heroism. These peasants are not extraordinary people, right? They're not called by God. They're not called by reason. They are submitting to a brutal tyrant in their country. The composition of this painting lends to a recollection of Jesus on the cross, that the central figure there in white, you can see the anguish on his face, his arms outstretched. He too is surrendering without a fight. This is an innocent man who is dying at the hands of an empire, very similar to the way that Jesus, a religious hero, viewed in every church in Spain. You can find him on a crucifix. Here is your common peasant dying at the hands of another evil empire. An empire that is faceless, nameless, but based on raw power and raw violence. Still have heroes at the center, not religious heroes, they're secular heroes. We don't know the name of this man. We don't know who he is. It's not like it's Socrates. It's not like it's Moses. It's not like it's Abraham. Your average common person can be heroic in the things that they do where they face injustice every day. Goya, executions of the 3rd of May. When we move along into the 19th century, the mid-19th century, one of the most controversial paintings that came out was Edouard Monet's Luncheon on the Grass, 1863. There's nothing heroic about this, right? It is a present, right? It's in the present, in the moment. People dressed in mid-19th century clothing. There's no obvious hero in this painting. They're not doing something that most people would consider extraordinary. They are, there's nothing religious about this or overtly religious about this, unless you start imagining what possibly could be a spiritual message. But it's basically, if you're just walking along into in a park and there someone is sitting eating lunch, but that's the big but, the woman there is naked. She probably, if you imagine the scene carrying on, she was like her friend in the water who was bathing, maybe got her clothes wet, took the clothes off to dry, and sitting there. But then she looks straight at you, right? You're looking at her, she's looking at you, and there's no blushing, right? There's no shame. Put this in a biblical context where Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, felt shame for their nakedness. This woman here is simply looking at you, and she feels no shame, right? Doesn't blush, doesn't turn away. She looks at you, and as if this is all quite ordinary, that nakedness is ordinary, the human body is ordinary, that it's really nothing to be ashamed of. So here we have a present common, right? It's common to be naked. There's nothing ordinary about humans being naked. And it is secular. It is devoid of religious context, or at least direct religious context in a traditionally Christian society. Now, there's nothing extraordinary about naked statues and naked paintings throughout European history. But those people that were presented without clothes were usually Greek gods and Greek goddesses, or some type of personification of Greek gods and goddesses. But this is an average, common, everyday woman as presented. And when this painting appeared in Paris, it caused a scandal because it was seen as pornographic. Now, by 20th century standards, this is hardly pornographic. But by mid-19th century Victorian standards, it was scandalous that an artist would present a common woman without her clothes on. So with Edouard Monet's Luncheon on the Grass, we see a full transition away from the past hero, past religious heroes, to a representation, a presentation of a contemporary event that's just a pretty picture to look at. There is no, not necessarily, could be, a deeper meaning associated with this painting. With the hero, we can see the transition from traditional to modern art.